Jay-Z didn't rap his way to $1 billion. He negotiated his way there. And the wild part is, the good guy moments people praise him for are tied to the same playbook behind the ugliest fallout, from the 2007 Rocawear sale, to the 2015 TIDAL rollout, to the 2019 NFL partnership, to the 2021 LVMH Ace of Spades move, and then the Duce numbers that had everybody side-eyeing the paperwork. And if you think this is just another "the Hove is a genius" victory lap, I'm telling you right now, the story is way colder than that. Because there are two Jay-Z's living in the same body. There's Shawn Carter, the disciplined architect who built a modern empire out of leverage, brand equity, and patience. And then there's the version of Jay-Z the suit machine sells back to us, the billionaire mentor, the lunch myth, the aspirational blueprint, where the culture does the lifting, but somehow the winnings keep landing in the same mailbox. And the layered mystery nobody wants to sit with is this: why do so many of his biggest wins look clean from far away, but get messy the closer you stand to the contracts, the exits, and the people who thought they were partners? What changed between "we all owners" energy and non-controlling interest reality? Why does every era have one headline that makes him look untouchable and another headline that makes somebody else look played? Stay with me, because when we get to the moment where the music bars, the corporate partnerships, and the ownership narratives all line up at the exact same angle, you're going to see the real superpower and the real cost, and it's sitting right under the part everybody quotes. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So here's the situation and why it matters right now. Jay-Z is one of the only rappers who successfully crossed the line from artist with money into institution with influence. Not just rich, positioned. And hip-hop loves that story because it feels like proof the culture can beat the system at its own game. But the same reason people celebrate Jay is also the reason he stays controversial. He doesn't just participate in capitalism, he plays offense with it. He takes culture, slang, taste, status, what people drink, what people wear, what people think is elite, and he turns it into leverage that corporations understand. That's the good. The culture finally has a negotiator who can walk into those rooms and not fold. The bad is, once you start playing that game, you can't act shocked when the scorecard gets ugly. Deals create winners and losers. Exits create resentment. And the biggest myth around Jay-Z is that he became a billionaire by being the best rapper or working the hardest. Nah, a lot of people work hard. A lot of people are great. Jay's edge is that he learned how to convert attention into ownership, and ownership into exits, and exits into more ownership. That's a different sport. And the ugly is the part fans don't like admitting. Sometimes the people closest to the story, business partners, artist co-owners, even communities impacted by development and politics-adjacent moves, feel like they were used as props in a bigger play, the culture as currency, but also the culture as collateral. So the question for today isn't, is Jay-Z a genius? He is. The question is, genius for who? Who actually benefits when the headline says Jay-Z's billions revealed? And when the camera turns off and the suit machine closes the door, who's left holding the bag while the legend keeps floating upward? Now let's start with the stuff you can actually see with your own eyes, no mind reading required. First piece of surface evidence is the way Jay-Z's billionaire narrative got publicly cemented. When major business media started labeling him a billionaire, it wasn't because of one album, one tour, or one chart run. It was because of a portfolio, stakes, catalog value, equity positions, brand deals, and assets that appreciate while you sleep. That framing matters because it taught fans to measure winning differently. Not bars, not even hits. It trained the timeline to worship capitalization tables. And you can see the ripple effect. Every new rapper for the last few years has to perform ownership like it's a stage costume. Everybody's a CEO, everybody's got a brand, everybody's got equity, but Jay-Z's version of this is unusually disciplined. He doesn't just slap his name on something. He attaches his name where the cultural conversion rate is highest. Liquor, fashion, tech-adjacent plays, sports, entertainment, infrastructure. Does everybody understand how crazy that is? Hip-hop used to argue about mixtapes. Now it argues about valuations. Second piece of surface evidence is the partnership pattern. Look at the public-facing moves over time. Rocawear becoming a real monetized exit, spirits becoming a status play, streaming becoming a narrative play, and sports becoming an influence play. Even if you don't memorize the numbers, the pattern is visible. Jay-Z gets into categories where the margins are fat and the customer behavior is emotional. People don't buy champagne because it's logical. They buy it because it signals. People don't pick a streaming service because the story makes them feel like they're supporting something bigger. Jay-Z sells stories that move units, and corporations pay for that story like it's a utility. Third piece of surface evidence is how he publicly positions ownership itself, especially with his constant emphasis on masters, independence, and long-term legacy. You'll hear him speak about not selling certain assets, about building something to pass down, about chess, not checkers, all that. And to be fair, that message has helped normalize smarter conversations in hip-hop. The average fan in 2010 wasn't debating publishing splits. Now people argue about recoupment like it's a playoff series.
But here's the part where it gets interesting. The same public ownership language can be used as a flashlight or as a fog machine, because ownership is not one thing. Majority control is not the same as a minority stake. Board seats are not the same as promotional alliances. A valuation headline is not the same as cash hitting the account. And a co-owner announcement is not the same as a signed equity agreement that actually lets you force an outcome. And that's why this story matters. Jay-Z didn't just get rich, he helped rewire the culture's idea of what rich even is. So when you see people arguing online like he did it the right way, you have to ask, right way according to what documents, what terms, what control, and who gets to say they were with him when the cameras are on? Because speaking of receipts, some of the biggest headlines in the Jay-Z empire are built on one of the most dangerous things in business, vibes. Vibes don't show the cap table. Vibes don't show liquidation preferences. Vibes don't show who can actually sell and who has to sit there and watch somebody else sell. And if you think I'm being dramatic, cool, keep that energy. Because the next layer is where the culture starts leaking what the surface can't prove by itself. And oh, do I have more for you. Because right after the glossy headlines, the timeline always splits into two groups. The people who think Jay-Z is a flawless blueprint and the people who swear he's the smoothest closer the culture ever produced. Meaning, if you're not reading the fine print, you're food. And to all the Hive would never defenders, I need you to stay seated for the next part, because we're about to talk about the moments where other artists, insiders, and even finance-minded commentators started pulling at threads that don't match the myth. And once you see which specific rollout created the biggest gap between what fans thought ownership meant and what ownership legally means, yeah, the stands are really not gonna like this one. Now we move into cultural evidence, the stuff that doesn't live in neat press releases, but keeps popping up in interviews, podcasts, community debates, and side comments from people who were close enough to smell the paperwork. The first cultural pressure point is the entire lunch with Jay-Z myth. It sounds harmless, even funny, but it's actually a perfect example of how the Jay-Z brand functions as a machine. The culture turned him into a wisdom vending machine. Insert proximity, receive riches. And Jay himself has pushed back on that idea in public, basically saying the value is in the music and the work, not some mystical lunch. That's important because it shows something real. He understands the myth is bigger than the man. But here's the twist. Even when he rejects the myth still benefits him. Why? Because it keeps him positioned as the final boss of business in hip-hop. It keeps every conversation orbiting his name. It keeps other moguls looking like amateurs. So even his humility can function like marketing. Is that evil? Not necessarily, but it is engineered. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Second cultural evidence, the way people reacted to TIDAL over the years. You had that era where it got framed as artists taking power back, creator-owned streaming, equity for the talent, all that. And then later, you started seeing a counter-story circulate, not just from random trolls, but from finance-minded voices and people reading public filings, saying the sale and the ownership structure might not have matched the stage show narrative that fans internalized. Some artists and commentators implied they didn't see the kind of payout the public assumed they did. Now, I want to be clear, not every detail is public, and people online love turning partial info into full conspiracies. That's the counterargument. But the reason the criticism sticks is simple. The rollout was built on symbolism, a we're all owners moment. And symbolism is fragile, because once any part of the paperwork looks like actually control was concentrated, the entire emotional pitch collapses. You can't sell people on revolution and then hand them a participation trophy, even if it was legal, even if it was normal. The culture doesn't judge normal. The culture judges what you implied. The third cultural evidence, the NFL partnership backlash. When Jay-Z and Roc Nation got publicly tied to NFL entertainment strategy, the culture split again. One side said it was power. Get in the room, change the room. The other side said it was a cosign to a machine that already showed you what it is. And the messiest part wasn't even the deal itself. It was the messaging around it, the vibe that the culture was being asked to move on from a moment that was still unresolved for a lot of people. Whether you agree with that criticism or not, you can't deny the effect. It made Jay-Z's legacy conversation more political, more complicated, and more vulnerable to accusations of selective outrage. And notice the theme across all three cultural flashpoints. The debate isn't really about Jay-Z's skill. It's about trust. It's about whether the public story matches the private structure. It's about whether for the culture is a mission or a marketing line. Now here's a nuance people hate admitting. Jay-Z can do real good and still make hard-nosed moves that leave people bitter. Those are not mutually exclusive. A person can fund justice work, advocate, create opportunity, and also be the most ruthless negotiator in the room. The culture keeps trying to force him into one box, hero or villain, because that's easier to argue about online. Real life doesn't fit in threads.
Pages, streamers, and personalities who survive on speed, not certainty. The incentive isn't to be right, it's to be first, loud, and repeatable. And once a story is repeatable, Drake is funding propaganda, YG is being set up, Ak is the mouthpiece, this person is compromised. It spreads because it's easy to retell in one sentence. That's why I called Drake in this particular storyline Algorithm Aubrey. Not because I'm saying he literally runs the algorithm, relax. I'm saying the algorithm loves the version of Drake that can be cast as a mastermind because it makes every random clip feel like part of a bigger plot. The PR Prince archetype performs well on the internet. It keeps people watching. And if you're a creator trying to eat, you'll keep feeding what performs. Now, system angle 2 is reputation warfare as business. People still think propaganda is only politics. No, propaganda is any sustained attempt to shape public perception at scale. And in music, perception equals leverage. Leverage equals deal terms, brand partnerships, touring demand, feature politics, and long-term legacy. If you can tilt the public story about an artist, make them seem dangerous, unstable, snitch-adjacent, protected, untouchable, compromised, you can change how the industry treats them without ever touching a courtroom. That's why these campaign accusations keep popping up around big names. Not because every artist is literally paying creators, but because it's plausible enough in the modern economy. Labels pay for marketing, brands pay for influence, PR teams play stories, playlists get pitched, narratives get seeded, and the line between marketing and manipulation gets blurry when the content is framed like journalism but paid like advertising. So when fans say Drake funds narratives, what they're often doing is taking a real structural truth, money moves stories, and assigning it to a specific villain they already dislike. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not, but the mechanism exists either way. And here's where it gets even darker.
Once you create an environment where people assume every storyline is paid, you destroy trust in the entire information chain. So now when something real happens, nobody believes it. And when something fake happens, half the internet treats it like confirmed fact. That's a catastrophic setup for any culture, especially one that already has a history of taking music beef too far. Now, connected back to this situation, the Draco the ruler conversation is emotionally loaded, regionally loaded, and politically loaded inside the culture. So if a narrative spikes again, especially if it spikes out of nowhere in the eyes of fans, people immediately ask who revived it and why now. And that's where Drake gets inserted as the easiest supervillain explanation, because he's big enough that people believe he could do it and controversial enough that people want to believe he did. And if you're Drake's camp, the danger isn't a blog post. The danger is that the story positions him as someone who plays with real street consequences through media. That's the kind of label that makes everything more volatile everywhere he goes forever. You can't stream your way out of that. You can't chart your way out of that. You have to outlive it through time and behavior. So the real systemic story is this. We've built a hip-hop media economy where the most rewarded content is the most inflammatory, where allegedly gets swallowed by the audience, and where fan identity turns speculation into mission. And that's why this situation feels like it could spiral, even if the original allegation is thin. Now, the truth bomb, and I'm going to phrase it the responsible way, but I'm not going to soften it. This entire storyline works like a trap, and it traps everybody, including Drake. Because the most damaging possibility isn't even Drake paid someone or Drake didn't pay someone. The most damaging possibility is that the culture now believes Drake is the kind of artist who would allegedly weaponize media narratives to put legal heat on another artist, and believes it strongly enough that it changes how people talk, post, and move around him. That perception in itself is the campaign result. Even if no check was written, even if no DM was sent, even if it's all just content creators chasing engagement, the output is the same. Drake's name gets tied to propaganda, and the West Coast conversation gets relit like a match in a dry room. And that's why Drake fans are scared, because they can feel how unstable the environment is. They can feel that we've left the lane of who rapped better and entered the lane of who is being accused of manipulating real-life consequences. They can feel that every time somebody posts a red alert type message, it invites the worst kind of attention. And they can feel that the internet is full of people who want to turn a rumor into a headline and a headline into an excuse. So when fans say, pray for Drake, or they're trying to end him, a lot of it is dramatic, yes, but underneath the drama is a real fear, the belief that the culture is willing to punish Drake outside of music. And whether you love Drake or hate Drake, you should not want that precedent, because if narrative punishment becomes normal, it won't stop at Drake. It never stops at one person. And the sickest part? The people who benefit most from this chaos aren't even the artists. It's the engagement farmers. It's the clip economy. It's the outrage merchants. It's the folks who get paid in attention while everybody else pays in stress, legal bills, and risk.
By packaging the culture as a product and selling it back to the same people who created it. And the ugly is the part no one wants to say out loud. When a deal is powered by cultural belief, the people with the strongest myth often get the strongest terms, and everybody else gets the privilege of being associated. That's why this story keeps repeating. Different year, different partner, same mechanism. Culture creates the wave, the soup machine sells tickets to the wave, and the closer is the one who knows how to turn a wave into a contract. If you only take one thing from this video, take this. Jay-Z didn't become a billionaire because he's the nicest guy or the worst guy. He became a billionaire because he understands at a surgical level the difference between being celebrated and being positioned. Now, before you run to the comments and turn this into "so you hate Jay-Z," relax. This is where we land the plane the right way. Because the hero of this story, the real hero, is the version of Shawn Carter that treated hip-hop like a business before hip-hop wanted to hear that. The guy who shows up to every era prepared. The guy who doesn't need to be outside every week because his chess moves are already on the board. He's not a superhero, he's a finisher. And here's the part that should actually inspire you, not the lunch myth. Jay-Z's most repeatable skill isn't being Jay-Z. It's discipline under hype. He didn't just chase applause, he chased terms. He didn't just chase hits, he chased longevity. While everyone else argued about who was hot that month, he kept building a structure that still prints value even when he's quiet. And it also explains why the controversies don't end him. The same way a rapper survives on a core fan base, an empire survives on diversified assets. When one narrative gets messy, the portfolio doesn't collapse. That's not luck, that's design. Now, let me give you one contrast line that sums up the whole thing. A lot of people want Jay-Z's results, but they only want the parts that look cool on Instagram. Because the unsexy reality is, the blueprint is paperwork, patience, and power. And power always makes people uncomfortable, especially in a culture that's used to being exploited, because we've developed a hair trigger for betrayal. Sometimes that trigger is justified, sometimes it's misaimed, but the feeling comes from somewhere real. So if you're watching this and you're a fan, you don't have to cancel Jay-Z to understand him. And if you're a critic, you don't have to call him a villain to see the skill. The mature read is this: he's a product of the system and also one of the few who learned how to beat that system in public while still using its tools. And that's why he's still winning. Not because everybody loves him, because the structure is built to survive feelings. And this is only the start, because the next era of hip-hop money is about to get even uglier and even more corporate. Sports betting, media rights, private equity creeping into entertainment, catalog financing, AI licensing, touring consolidation, all of that is the new battlefield, and Jay-Z has been circling those rooms for years. So watch what happens next when more artists start chasing the Jay-Z model without Jay-Z leverage. Watch how many equity announcements show up with zero clarity on control. Watch how many partnerships get framed as empowerment when they're really just smarter endorsements. And watch how fast the suit machine will manufacture new billionaire myths to keep the culture believing the system is fair. If you want me to keep breaking this stuff down with receipts, context, and the parts people are scared to say plainly, make sure you're subscribed, because I'm not doing the soft version of these stories. And if you've made it this far, you already know this channel isn't here to sell bedtime stories. We're here to read the fine print out loud. And for the next video, I want to pull one thread that connects everything we talked about today. The real reason ownership talk got so loud in rap, who benefited the most from the shift, and how a couple of the loudest independent success stories might be way more dependent than the timeline realizes. Because once you see who's really funding the freedom, you're going to hear a lot of these legacy conversations differently.